Gotcha.
Hey, how's it going everybody? It's the Game Economist back with another Dark Souls 3 PvP guide. Today we'll be taking a look at the Ringed Knight paired Greatswords. I'm just going to be calling it the Ringed Knight Ultra Greatsword because that's kind of, it makes more sense to me to call it that. Alright, well let's dive right in. The Ringed Knight Ultra Greatsword gets Great Hammer Poise, and that means if you bring your poise up to 39.3, you're able to poise through all the other Ultra Greatswords. So that's one of the first attributes that kind of helps this weapon out, is that it gets pretty good poise, right? The next thing is the range on it's pretty good. It doesn't have a range problem. It gets really high range with the L1, right? That's the attack where you're thrusting forward with both of your Ultra Greatswords. The weapon art also has okay range because it's technically a projectile. And then finally, your basic R1 is just a little shorter than the Greatsword Ultra Greatsword, and that's the longest Ultra Greatsword in the game. So yeah, the range on this weapon is pretty good. The next thing I want to talk about is the damage on this weapon. You have the weapon art, which I believe true combos with itself, and so it does a terrific amount of damage, over 800. And then you have the L1 combo. It has 3 parts to it, and only the first 2 parts true combo, but if your opponent is bad, they won't roll out of the third part properly. So you could potentially land the whole thing, and that'll deal over 1000 damage. But if you're just landing the first 2 parts, 700 to 800 damage probably. That being said, the actual neutral R1 is bad. It doesn't deal a lot. I was getting 585 AR, I believe, and that was at a 40-40 build. For an Ultra Greatsword to deal 585 AR, that's really bad. You really want to be seeing like 700 AR. That would be a lot more appropriate. But no, you're not seeing that with this weapon. Okay, so the damage is good on this weapon, right? However, that's only if you're landing the weapon art or the L1. And it turns out that landing the L1 these days has gotten really hard. Everybody's kind of figured out when the active frames are. They just roll out of it. Everybody has learned to dodge the weapon art. The only people you truly catch with the weapon are noobs. And in a try-hard duel, you're not fighting noobs, right? And again, going back to the fact that it only has 585, or roughly 600 AR, your neutral R1 is bad, and your neutral R2 is bad. On top of that, this is a big deal, so pay attention to this part. You can't block as you approach your opponent, right? Your block has been given up for your L1 attacks. That's a huge problem. It was the same problem I was having with the Farron Ultra Greatsword. So when I'm playing an Ultra Greatsword, one of the most important things that I can do is, hold the block down and get right up in my opponent's face and not attack them. That's a big deal when you're playing a slow poise weapon, because your opponent is standing there wondering, do I attack him? Do I try to interrupt him? Your opponent might risk attacking you while you're blocking. Well, if you're blocking, you don't take that much damage, and you're not stunned, which means they don't get a true combo on you, right? It means if they hit you once, you roll backwards, and you already didn't take their full damage. Blocking's incredibly important with an ultra great weapon. These guys can't block. So the only thing you can really do with the paired knight ultra great sword is just kind of be extremely passive and hope that your opponent messes up the timing of their dodge on the L1. And that, I promise you, doesn't happen versus a skilled player. They will never mess up that roll. Relying on your opponent to mess up is great probably in the random arena, because it actually happens. But I've played against people who are very serious about dueling, and they just memorize when to roll, and it's very hard to get them to make a mistake ever, right? The other thing is they might just hard counter you by bringing out a decent shield like the Black Knight shield. This is a pure physical weapon. A Black Knight shield will block the L1 every time. So after extensively using this Ultra Greatsword, I think I can say this is one of the worst Ultra Greatswords in the game. Just like the Farron Greatsword, I'm sure there's going to be people who work very hard to practice with this and so that they can do their best with it, right? I have weapons that aren't meta weapons that I enjoy using, but I really can't recommend this to anyone who is serious about duels. I actually think this is worse than the Farron Ultra Greatsword. I've used both of them extensively. I've used all of the Ultra Greatswords extensively, except for the Profaned Ultra Greatsword, and I need to try out the Cathedral Knight Ultra Greatsword again. But after that, I've actually used the Ultra Greatswords. Maybe that's my most used weapon class, followed by probably the Great Hammers. I think the Great Hammers are probably my second most used weapon class. I can say I really didn't like these. Just not being able to approach while blocking, just having like the rolling attack, for example. Well, your R1 rolling attack as opposed to the L1 rolling attack. The R1 rolling attack is way better. It has better tracking and it comes out, I want to say, faster. Could be wrong about that coming out faster. They could come out at the same speed, but the tracking is very different on them. The L1 rolling attack, very poor tracking, and then it uses up more of your stamina too, so you're left prone a little more, I want to say. Yeah, so you want to use the regular R1 when you're using a rolling attack, and with it dealing only, a little under 600 AR, if you catch somebody in the rolling attack, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter, it doesn't do enough damage. It does like the damage of a decent greatsword. Very annoying. So a brief summary, here is a weapon that if you don't know how to dodge it, you're going to get caught in the L1 and it's going to deal a massive amount of damage to you. But if you practiced against it, you'll dodge the L1 every time, and that's the only thing this weapon has going for it. The weapon art and the L1 are very easy to dodge. They're very easily countered by a Black Knight shield, and the weapon's not able to approach while blocking, which is a big deal for Ultra Greatswords. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of the Farron Ultra Greatsword, right? But this one I actually think is even worse than the Farron Ultra Greatsword. It is that bad, guys. And yeah, so I think actually I had to decide between D- or E+. I'm actually going to put it into E+ for anyone who is serious about duels. It's going to be E+ tier. Alright, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Oh my gosh, you guys! I just want to thank y'all so much!